Hey folks, Matt Easton here, Schola Gladiatoria. Now let's talk about a serious topic. Of course, all the topics I talk about on this channel are serious, but let's talk about knife defense. But more specifically, my issue, not with knife defense videos, but with the critics of knife defense videos. So one of my biggest gripes is, I study historical combat systems and World War I, World War II combatives as well, relatively modern stuff, and little bits of modern stuff as well. I have done modern martial arts in the past, and of course I know plenty of people who currently train and teach those. And one of the things that's pretty much universally true of the internet is that if you look at any video talking about defense against knife attack, assuming that you are unarmed, you don't have a pistol, you don't have a knife, you don't have a stick, you don't have any other sort of weapon, unarmed defense against knife. One of the universal truths you seem to be able to rely on the internet is that any of these videos or articles, essays, anything talking about this topic, you will get a far higher than average number of critics. And I have to say it's one of the reasons that I don't talk about knives and daggers as much on my channel as actually we look at them and train them in my club. We train rondel dagger, which is the medieval disc-hilted stabbing dagger, common in the 14th, 15th, 16th centuries. We train that not uncommonly, not infrequently in my London club. And in fact, we also do Bowie knife, and we do obviously defense against the rondel dagger, defense against Bowie knife, this kind of stuff. So we do actually look at knives and daggers quite a bit in our training, and it's very much part of HEMA, that is historical European martial arts. It's very much part of the repertoire. The fact is, if you're learning how to use spears and you're learning how to use swords, you usually learn how to use knives and daggers of various sorts as well, because they are part of the armament of historical periods. And in fact, they're so inextricably part of those historical periods that they even explain how and why some of those martial arts in those times developed. So for example, it's probable that one of the reasons that boxing and pugilism wasn't really a big thing in the medieval period, whereas wrestling was because everybody had knives or daggers on them. So if everybody is walking around either with the equivalent of a kitchen knife, or the equivalent of a Bowie knife, or the equivalent of the rondel dagger, then sort of trying to duke it out with your fists is just not a very effective way of fighting against someone who's got a sharp and pointy object in the hand. So why is it that you see so many, whenever you see videos or articles or anything else talking about defense against a knife attack, why is it you see so much criticism? And I think it's partly because I think it's easy in a way. We get a free pass when we're talking about historical weapons, when we're talking about spears or swords or rapiers or whatever that are not used in the modern world in a kind of street context. Hardly anyone in the modern world has known someone who's been attacked by a sword or by a spear. Thankfully, we should say. Relatively few people actually know someone who's been attacked with a firearm as well, unless you happen to work in security or law enforcement or military or whatever, statistically across a population. But knives being accessible everywhere in the world, regardless of what the laws of that country are, or regardless of the relative kind of peacefulness or warlike state of that country, the fact is knives are everywhere. And here I showed a kitchen knife, and the simple fact is, whether it's an incredibly kind of relatively safe country with relatively low crime and very strict laws like the UK where I live, the fact is every household has a bunch of kitchen knives in it. And not only knives, people kind of just fixate on knives, but if you actually look at crime statistics, you'll see things like this screwdriver are also used, unfortunately, in crime as well. So even a country like the UK that has very strict knife and weapon laws and has guns are practically almost never used in crime really in the UK, except sometimes between gangs, but in normal street crime they're just not used, practically never used in burglaries, for example. Even in a country like the UK, the fact is that people can still always get access to kitchen knives and screwdrivers and pointy objects, because the world is full of pointy objects, and you ban one group of pointy objects, they'll just use another group of pointy objects, or they just use the one that's been banned because they don't care about the fact that they've been banned, if you can still get access to them. So there are pointy objects all around, and so I think because people are more exposed to pointy objects and knives and screwdrivers and things like that, and also because perhaps people know people who've been attacked with those things, perhaps they themselves have been attacked by those things, so it seems more real, it seems more street, it seems more something that's likely to happen. So I think that a lot of people, I guess, not only view the subject more seriously, and I'm not saying that they shouldn't, not only do they view the subject more seriously, but they also regard it as more realistic, more applicable to the modern world, and so on and so forth. Now, where is my annoyance? Where does my annoyance come from with the fact that people are so critical of videos looking at knife defense? Well, fundamentally it boils down to this. If you're unarmed and if the other person has a knife, you fundamentally have two basic choices. Your choices are to either physically try and defend yourself or to run away. Okay, and now a lot of people on the internet quite glibly go, you just never, if someone attacks you, just run away. And as I've said in previous videos, that's not always an option. Number one, you might not be as fast as running as the person who's attacking you. Okay, so there's this assumption that if you run away, the attacker will just not keep trying to attack you. And if they know that you've got money on you, or if there's some, they've got a grudge against you or whatever, or they've just lost their mind and they're a completely crazy person, the fact is they might run after you, and they might be a faster runner than you, or might have more stamina than you, or there might be physical barriers to you running away. You might be in a train, you might be in a bus, you might be in a room, you might not actually physically be able to run away, or you might have to protect someone. So when you're attacked, you might be with your wife or girlfriend or boyfriend, you might be with your children, you might be with your elderly parents. There's all sorts of situations why you might not be able to run away, and you might have to fight them. Now, I would say it's pretty much assuming that you're not prepared to be attacked. So some people would say you should wear body armor. Another YouTuber who's a mate of mine suggested wearing chainmail, which is not necessarily practical on a day-to-day basis. And there are other ways that you can prepare yourself. But we're going to assume here that apart from training, apart from doing martial arts or just awareness and things like that, you can't, in that moment, you can't suddenly magic some body armor out of thin air. Okay, so definitely using your surroundings, using any potential items of self-defense that might happen to be around. If you happen to be someone who uses a walking stick or an umbrella, or if you happen to have a chair, if you happen to have objects around, a bottle, an ashtray, any other bits and pieces lying around that you could use to defend yourself, obviously if you can even the score, yes. But the thing that really gets me and really gets my goat and annoys me is the people who say that there is no sure self-defense against a technique or martial art or strategy, tactics against a person attacking you with a knife. And that is fundamentally true. In Fiore, if we go into historical sources and go all the way back to the year 1410, then a certain Italian gentleman by the name of Fiore de' Liberi, who was living in northern Italy in the early 15th century, pretty much says that. He says that the dagger or the knife is a very dangerous weapon because it's so quick and unpredictable, and it's very close range. It's very difficult to fight against, very difficult to defend yourself against. Yes, we all agree that. However, unless you're going to bow down and go, I may as well give up, yeah, you may as well fight. If someone has attacked you for whatever reason, if someone has attacked you with a knife or a screwdriver, or frankly any weapon, then your choice is to run away, or if you can't do that or don't want to do that, give up and die, okay, or give up to whatever they want, or obviously if they want your money, just give them your money. It's not worth risking your life for that. Or you've got to fight, okay. And if your life is at threat, then in the UK and in most civilized countries and many uncivilized countries, you have the legal right to self-defense. So you have the legal right to self-defense because, of course, at the end of the day, any living person has, really, at the end, on your deathbed, all you've really had is your life. Okay, yes, we have possessions, but we can't take them with us. You have family, you have memories, you have all this, but really you have your life. And so you have to protect your life and perhaps of your loved ones as well. So you've got to fight. Now, if you've got to fight, if we all agree, and I hope we all do agree, if you're attacked and you've got no other options, there are no weapons available to you, there's no body armor suddenly available to you, you can't escape for various reasons, you can't run away. If you've got to fight, you've got to do something, okay? Now this is the area we're now getting into martial arts. So if you've got to fight against someone who's attacking you with some form of sharp and pointy object, which might be a weapon like a Bowie knife, or it might be something that's supposed to be a kitchen implement, or it might be something that's supposed to be a tool, doesn't matter. If they're attacking you, you've got to fight. At the moment you've got to fight, any form of training that you've got that might be useful is a good thing. So please, critics of techniques and strategies for defending yourself against this attack, yes, indeed, you shouldn't give people a false sense of confidence. You shouldn't teach people to seek out this type of encounter because it's incredibly dangerous, and I don't want to understate that point. Yes, it's incredibly dangerous to make that decision where you think, okay, at this point, I've now got to fight back. I've now got to defend myself or defend my family or my friend or whoever. I've got to fight. Once you've made that decision to fight, you may as well go into it 100%. Okay? If you've decided to fight, fight to win. Okay? Now, the actual minutiae of how you do that comes down to different systems and different ethoses, different martial arts styles. And yes, we can argue about that. We can say, for example, that pure sort of 18th century pugilism, probably against a concerted knife attack, is not a good martial arts system to go with, because whilst you're punching them, you're at punching range, and someone who's at punching range is also at stabbing range, and so you're going to be punching them and they're going to be stabbing you back. It doesn't offer you any control, it doesn't offer you any hope of disarming or the knife or stopping that knife from hitting you, plunging into you. You're only going to be punching them, and for the most part, unless you're extremely lucky or extremely powerful and well trained, punches don't usually actually do very much to people. I mean, I've been punched lots of times, and I've seen people punch lots of times in pub fights and all that kind of stuff, street fights, and it's, in my experience, it's very rare for people to be knocked out or even winded. And anyway, punches don't normally incapacitate very quickly, whereas a stab obviously can. So generally speaking, if we look at the medieval and Renaissance approach to knife attacks, it is forms of wrestling. So it is forms of grappling, grabbing, controlling. So if someone's attacking you with a knife, the big difference between you and them, assuming that you're of roughly similar size, which isn't obviously in reality always the case, but assuming you're of roughly similar size and training and that kind of stuff, the big difference between you two is the knife. And frankly, let's not live under any illusions here. There have been many cases of very highly trained martial arts, even instructors and practitioners, being killed. I know of one MMA fighter, and I know of a judo instructor who was about 5th or 6th dan black belt, who were killed by just a random person with a knife. This is a big game changer. If someone attacks you with one of these, even if you're very well trained, you are at a massive disadvantage, just to reiterate that point. So you should be aware of that. But if you can get some form of control, if you can get the knife off them, if you can stop the knife, if you can reduce the number of times the knife hits you, if you know, even if it has gone into you, it doesn't mean that you're necessarily incapacitated or dead. Many people who unfortunately succumb to knife attacks are hit many times by the knife. So if you can reduce the number of times, I have done first aid qualifications in the past, and it wasn't beaten around the bush, the fact that the number of holes in a person is obviously increasing the chances that they're going to die, either from internal bleeding out, or just puncturing something important, because every time it goes into you, obviously it's like rolling a dice. It might hit an important organ like your heart, or it might not. So anyway, reducing the number of wounds on your body is always a good thing. So fundamentally, I'm not going to go into the details of how to defend yourself from a knife attack, because I'm not the guru on that, despite the fact I do train that and I do study sources on that, from everything from the Second World War all the way back to the medieval period, and modern stuff to some extent as well. And there are some martial arts that I would advise not going to, I will only name one of those that I'm really not a big fan of, and that's Systema, which I personally think is complete bullshit. But most other martial arts have something to give towards this, and generally speaking, as I say, I think grappling, disarming, controlling is where you're gonna survive the encounter, assuming you can't run away and you can't fight your way out like just by making space and running. Assuming you have to stay there and you have to fight to the finish, I think ultimately you've got to get control over that weapon and over that weapon arm or hand, and so grappling is going to be the way to go, and certainly that's backed up by historical sources where we see that really wrestling and a certain form of wrestling, essentially almost distance wrestling a lot of the time, but getting control over the weapon arm and then coming in close. And finally, I would also say, I would caveat that with the fact that pure out unarmed grappling arts against unarmed grappling arts, for example Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, does give you a toolbox of really useful things, but the problem is that they often, not always, but often the people that train specifically for MMA type fighting don't necessarily train against a weapon, and the problem is the distance considerations and controlling of the weapon arm is super important, and if you haven't trained that bit, you really need to add that onto your training. So I would say, if you're training BJJ or traditional Japanese Jiu-Jitsu or catch wrestling or perhaps even Aikido or other forms of grappling basically, then if you want to improve your training to deal with weapons, then do some training against people with simulated weapons, because it really changes the priorities and the distances of and when you do things. So you have to get control of that weapon before you come in and try and get the person into an armbar or anything like this. You know, you have to be mindful of that weapon all the time and where it's pointing and what the person is able, and also the fact that the person can't get it into their other hand and use it with the other hand and this kind of stuff. So to wrap up, I'm just going to say that really, if you're ever the person that finds yourself saying under a video that's about knife defense that, oh, there's no way you can defend yourself against a knife attack, please don't be that person. Okay, because fundamentally, yes, it's very hard, yes, your chances aren't great, but there are situations where your only hope for survival, or perhaps even the survival of your friends or your family, your children, whatever, even your dog maybe, depends on you doing something to nullify or reduce or mitigate the effects of that knife on you or them. And it's about control, and that you must do something. And obviously that something can take many forms. As I mentioned, it could involve obtaining a weapon of your own, which somehow neutralizes the advantage they have with the knife. But if you don't have anything, then you may as well fight. And if you're going to fight for all you're worth. And you know, sometimes, perhaps not the majority of the time, but very occasionally, that knife attacker might not be prepared for that full-on person coming back at them. There's psychology involved here as well. So, there we go. I realise that this is a very emotive topic, knife defence and knife videos in general. Knowing the law a bit, knowing your rights to self-defence, and being aware of your surroundings and aware of your escape routes, and not going to stupid places, not getting into stupid arguments, and giving up your money if someone really wants it to protect you or your family. All good things. So, thanks for watching. Obviously, I'm very interested to see your comments below. Try and keep it civil. Try and keep it rational and evidence-based. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you really soon again on Schola Gladiatoria channel for another video, hopefully, of historical or contemporary martial arts interest. Cheers, folks. Thanks for watching. We've got extra videos on Patreon. Please give our Facebook a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Cheers, folks.